what he's
signed up
what
for.
was his job description, right? Exactly. But he'll officially July 1st be the city administrator.
Excellent, excellent.
7:04, and you're now live.
Okay, 7:04. So I guess this is a call to order the June 8th, 2021 Environmental Board meeting for the city of Oneonta. So welcome back, everybody, on this incredibly humid day. All right, so I guess we will take roll call. So Commissioner Ainsworth, I see him here. Oh, I'm going to screw it up, Paul, again. I'm sorry. Commissioner, what?
Paul Bischoff.
Bischoff. Yeah, okay, that's what I was going to go for this time. I'm getting closer, at least in my head, I'm getting it right before I say it out there. I apologize. Commissioner Forster Rothbart without a hyphen.
Yes.
Commissioner.
No hyphen is not present.
That's right. Good. Both are not here. Commissioner Keel.
Present.
And Commissioner Pollock is here as well. Okay, so we are, yes, thank you. Excellent. And Council Member Davies is here as well. Okay, so I sent out the minutes kind of late. I apologize. Are there any revisions or deletions or additions or anything like that that you saw that you would like to bring to my attention? Okay. Seeing and hearing none, do I have a motion to accept the minutes of our last meeting, May 11th?
I'll say yes.
Okay, so Kathy, and do I have a second?
Second.
And we got Gina. Okay. Let's see. All in favor of approving said minutes, say aye. Raise your hand, whatever you want to do. One,
Aye.
2,
Aye.
3, 4. Okay. There's no room for nays. Okay, Mike, I got you. Okay, nays, abstentions, no. Excellent. Okay, so the minutes of the May meeting have been approved.
This is out of order because we just approved the minutes, but there is one correction.
All right.
There's a sentence that says Commissioner Pollock asked about logging on Black Trails.
The Black Trails.
I think that's supposed to say Greenwood.
Oh, that's how she referenced them to me, and that's how I.
Oh.
So what do you want me to call them again?
I guess I just don't know what the Black Trails are.
I guess they're the trails that are labeled black on the map.
Top trails at Wilbur Park.
I'm sorry, the what? The top trails?
Right, Mark Davies, the top trails, and they have black markers on.
Yeah, they're the black marker ones. Yeah, the red and the yellow that are the lower ones.
Okay, so to be accurate, they're not. To be accurate, they're not in Wilbur Park. They're in Greenwood. They're on Greenwood property. But maybe that's not an important issue.
How about this? Above Wilbur Park. Haha. Because it's not, because the logging is not actually part of that. That's a weird part that Mark was telling us last time, where it kind of skirts a few properties. So we'll just call it that.
I did not know until last meeting that it wasn't Wilbur Park. I had no idea it was a cemetery that was actually across the whole road.
Neither did I. I think we all got to learn a little bit about that as well. Okay. So excellent. Again, naming matters, right, guys? Do we have any petitioners in the YouTube room that are asking questions, Bonnie?
There are none.
Okay. Good. Let's see. We did get we did get one letter. I don't know who it all went out to. I think, Mark, you were part of this conversation at one point. A city resident, Mr. Conover, had some concerns about the trees being removed by the tennis courts. The new basketball court in Wilbur Park. He was concerned about, I think, noise. I referred him to Greg. Greg responded. I appreciate that, Greg Mattice. And I tried to follow up after I got my grading done, and I haven't heard back from that. But there was some concerns about that. Does anybody?
Kevin,
Yes.
I can refer to that now, or I can refer to it in my report. What would you prefer?
Let's do it now, because that was a particular question or correspondence. So it'll give me something to write there anyways.
So, yeah, I've been in contact with Mr. Conover, and let's see, several times we, being city employees, have kind of gone out there and taken a look at the site. Most recently, yesterday, we went out and we looked at it. Greg was there. We also had our city arborist, Fred Hathaway, who works really closely with the environmental board, to look at the trees that were in question. And we determined that the original 6 trees, that there's 3 that can remain, but there are 3 trees that are troubled trees. And what I'm going to describe them as troubled trees is, one is basically, I'm going to call it a very tall stump. It's had so many branches cut off over the years, and it doesn't have any branches on the backside. It really needs to come out. 2 remaining trees are leaning towards the tennis courts because of the nature of the way that it has kind of grown up, and there's several trees around both of these. The canopy is basically on one side, and the branches have kind of come up on one side. It's the side that's near the tennis courts, and that's where obviously was getting most of the light. And so these have become kind of heavy trees towards the tennis courts, and are both kind of leaning. And given the nature of some of the winds in this area, and the fact that we have had trees drop on the fences before, the thinking was that it's best to take them out. Recognizing fully that the environmental board is working to put trees in the ground, that might contradict with the idea of removing trees. But I think that this is a particular situation where we're trying to kind of weigh out, right? No one wants to remove trees, especially our mature trees. But we have a situation where we have trees that are lopsided. They're not standing perfectly, and they're leaning, and they're weighted in that way. So alternatively, we could certainly cut off limbs so that there's less weight towards the tennis courts, but then you have another bare tree. So I think it makes a lot of sense to take them down. What I would recommend is that perhaps, as the environmental board is looking for sites to put trees in the future, that this could be an area that they could target and use some trees. There's a pretty good kind of buffer zone between the property lines on Union Street and the tennis courts that might be ripe for putting some nice trees in there that can kind of bush out and get kind of broad and kind of be a visual barrier for the residents, as well as then kind of replacing those trees. So Greg, certainly feel free to fill in anything if you want.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think you did a good job summarizing that. Just to reiterate kind of what Mark said, I think we've done a good job overall communicating with the residents. I think there's one in particular who's still pretty concerned about the 3 that we are removing. But as Mark said, we had Fred, our certified arborist, look at those, and it really just, at the end of the day, makes sense to remove those 3, keep the others, and hopefully plant some more in the future. I think that's a fair compromise. And some of the other concerns the neighbors had are unrelated to the tree removal and more concerning the use of the course, and that's something that we're going to be discussing at tomorrow night's Parks and Rec meeting.
Yeah, and there have been some ideas that have been put out there that will be considered by Parks and Rec that came from the community members. So trying to listen, and I feel like my role there was to try to find a compromise and try to figure out what works best. And again, trying to weigh the environmental interests of the city versus the kind of financial interests of the city. And I think this is a particular case where we need to think about financial interests of the city. Is if we were to lose one of these trees on top of the fence, that's a pretty big shot to the taxpayers. Whereas right now we can take it out in a controlled nature and just be really conscious or conscientious and conscious about trying to plant other trees in the future.
Gina?
Yeah, quick question, Mark or Greg. It seems to me that while removal of these trees might be reasonable, that one might ask what the process is to make the decisions, who decides, and again, is it informed by tree health, I assume, from what you say, Mark, or is it cost benefit, or is it how we feel at the time?
I'll pass to Greg, but I think that there is a lot of thought and consideration that goes into all these decisions. I mean, I wouldn't say cost benefit is the only analysis. It's certainly tree health. It's tree, I'm trying to say not tree health, but kind of tree makeup, right? Some trees might have better systems and better kind of branch systems that lend themselves to being, these are great trees, they're in great shape, versus others that look like they're just problems waiting to happen. So Greg, certainly feel free to fill in.
Yeah, I think it's kind of all of the above. I mean, normally when we're our certified arborists, we contract with somebody to do this. It's not a city employee, but they go around and Fred, he advises us on where hazardous trees are, that hazardous to the public realm. So the streets, the sidewalks, and the parks. In this case, where something is treated of this nature, the structure of it is leaning entirely in one direction. It's imbalanced, and it is threatening both the city's property and defense, the court, as well as anyone who might be using the court. Not that it's, it's a dead tree or dying, but it is, in his estimation, something that should be considered for removal. It's kind of a weighing of options or factors.
Gina?
I appreciate that. It does raise a process question, and we also had a tree taken out nearby that was a beloved tree of the crows. It had its problems, I'm sure, but maybe if there was some way that the close by neighbors get a notification that this tree is problematic and we've looked at it and it's coming out. And so people would put up with the loss and the noise, perhaps, or other issues if they had information, if they had been told. That might just help ease the conflicts too.
Okay.
Yeah, I think most people recognize that that there are conflicts when you're having an urban forest, right? And that you're trying to a well-maintained urban forest is trying to balance a lot of different things, and safety and to structures and people is clearly one of them. And I agree, Jen, if it is at all possible, just putting even a note on neighbors' doors, saying this tree over here, or a sign by the tree, be probably more effective, or at least more time effective. Just saying this tree is going to go for the following reasons. Because you're going to spray paint them, and everybody sees the spray paint, you kind of know that's going to come down eventually. But it might not be a bad idea if it's at all possible to do. Mike, you looked like you had a thing that you're gonna. Nope.
No, I'm just listening, thinking about it.
Okay, sorry. My teacher radar for who's asking a question is all thrown off with Zoom. I can't quite get all of that anymore. So, all right. So I think that's good. All right. So, Mark, do you want to tell us a little bit things about Common Council that are not regarding those
Sure.
6 trees?
Well, you took away probably the better part of what I was going to be speaking about there. I will say that the what I'll say is the B ordinance, although we're not calling it that because it included other things, that started with the environmental board. I think it was the last meeting prior to COVID shutdown.
Yep, March 21.
By petitioner. That passed through Common Council and was signed into law with no objections from the public at the open public hearing. So that is now part of our laws, which is great. And so kudos to the environmental board for starting a process, taking a petitioner's thoughts and comments into concern, and working with city staff to begin the process of crafting the ordinance and all the language. And then ultimately, it took a bit to get through committee, but I think that there's a very good ordinance that we can be proud of. And I really will encourage you to take a look at it, because I will say that Stephen Yearley did a fantastic job of taking a lot of the kind of ideas and concepts that might be only known to folks that keep bees, and was able to get some great visuals that really support the ordinance and make it really very, very thoughtful and very well done ordinance. So really encourage you to take a look at it. The other only interesting news of note for this this board is who's sitting in the meeting is Greg Mattice will be starting as our city administrator July 1st. As you can see, he's already been taking care of a lot of, he's already been acting in that role, although he's officially not been in that role, but I'm really happy to have Greg, in this capacity of city administrator. Greg has worked closely with the environmental board for many, many years in his role right now as the city engineer. So I think that it would be great to have Greg at the helm of as the city administrator.
Yeah, I want to also, I think, hopefully speak on the behalf of the environmental board here in agreeing that Stephen Yearley did a fantastic job, really helping push this idea forward. He heard that we were doing something and had already got this proposed ordinance to us to look at for comments, and then of course Gene and the rest of us had comments there as well. And then I think Stephen really did a fantastic job, and I think I want to recognize him as doing that for us. So that's fantastic. And yeah, so that brings me, I guess, to Greg. So back in the day, George Krautauer, our city, not administrator at that point, city, what was that title? What was this? City
Manager.
What? Manager, right. Yes. As city manager, often sat in on our meetings as the environmental board when we were in person. It was usually a very helpful thing person to have. And I realized that Greg, we would be gaining something by having Greg come in, if not every month, have a standing invitation to our meetings. I thought I had sent it out earlier. I didn't. And Greg surprised me pleasantly by saying that he'd be here today. So I just thought today, maybe Greg, if you just wanted to say what you might want to be hoping that the environmental board of the city can do, or you don't have any words to say at all, that's fine as well. Don't mean to put you on the spot. And then you can just listen in and and drop out when you need to, and whatever meetings you feel like coming to, you're welcome. So Greg.
Thanks, Kevin, and thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. And I'm happy to come to as many meetings as I can. I can't promise that I'll be at every single one, but I do think that the work you guys do is really important. I think this group here, from what I've heard and read and heard from Mark's report, seems like you're really engaged in a lot of things, and I think that's great. So however we can support that as the city staff within our resources and abilities, we're happy to do so. I guess one of the things I'm excited to be working with you on is building out a tree, kind of an urban forest management plan. Now, a tree planting plan. We've had a low budget for tree planting since I've been here. We've been able to up that a little bit this year. We're going to get kind of in a groove, I hope, over the next few years with how we go about planting and maintaining those trees, making sure they get watered frequently enough and that sort of thing. It's something that DPW hasn't done a lot of because we don't have a ton of resources there, but I think it's something that we can, working with you guys, we can accomplish more than we have in the last few years as far as planting goes. So, we're pretty good at coming up with lists and cutting down trees. We can be just as good at planting them because that's really important. And I think, I don't know if you guys have seen it. I'm sure some of you have, if not all of you, the report that was done by Forcon, and before that by Cornell. There was a group, they called themselves a SWAT team back in 6-8 years ago, laid the groundwork for this next step, I think, where we have a full inventory of the city's street trees, as well as a lot of the parks trees, and it even identified planting sites. So if we could start to go through, I think maybe identify a approved street trees list, and then move that into kind of a plan where we want to plant each year, and kind of focus on one area at a time where you can kind of make a visual impact. I think that'd be really great. So I'm sure there's other priorities you guys have, but that's just one thing that I think we can get to work on. So other than that, I'm happy to be here. Let me know how I can help.
As in high school, my job was working for the village, my village's park district, and I drove in a Econoline van with a 1,000-gallon water tank attached to the back, and I watered every single newly planted tree throughout the summer. So I hit every tree twice a week, and yeah, that was quite the experience. So if you need anybody,
Is that a volunteer? I hear.
what?
Volunteer?
I don't know. Maybe. I will say that I had to fill the tank up from fire hydrants, and it's also a good way to test which fire hydrants have bad valves. Just putting that out there. This is the day before cell phones, so you had to knock on the neighbor's door. Can I borrow your phone? I got to call my boss. The street's now flooded. So yeah, Greg, I think this is going to be. I'm really happy that you want to come here. I think you're going to, if you could stick around through today, I think you're going to hear a lot of good things that we've been working on, in addition to trees, or just getting started. And I think that the discussions that the environmental board has had the last couple meetings are probably at a place now where it'd really be helpful to have your input on some of these things. So the way that we've been doing this, we've done our standing committee structure. It's not really a committee; it's just basically 5 action things that various groups of us have decided to take the lead on, and that's been defining most of our meetings, as opposed to having specific new business or anything like that. So, with that in mind, let's go ahead and we'll start with urban forest. So,
yeah, very good. Greg, nice to finally see you face to face, even though we're through a screen here. We've been exchanging a few emails as we've coordinated things, and I too look forward to working with you in the city on this common cause that we have. And having said that, Dave Hutchinson and I spent a couple hours yesterday together, finalizing, or very nearly finalizing, a list of planting sites for the 12 trees sitting in pots in his backyard presently. We have 6 pear trees and 6 ginkgos. And I think we've split them reasonably between folks who have reached out to us either this year or last year for trees in their yards, or at least in front of their houses, and a couple of trees that the environmental board had planted in the past that have not thrived. So some of those sites are replacement trees, some of those sites are new plantings. And we very much hope to get them in the ground in the next 2 weeks or so, because they need to be planted. Moving forward, we'll continue just to keep our eye out on places that lack canopy, and be receptive to community input for requests for plantings, as well as working with Greg and Fred and the folks from the city. So I think good things are happening.
So Dave, I was wondering, I know that we have a spreadsheet of where things are planted, an idea of where things might go. I remember there was some half thought of conversation maybe early on in these days. Have we come up with a way of putting that as like a Google sheet, or someplace where like the environmental board members here, if we hear somebody, we can just put it on there as opposed to trying to keep track of a lot of email chains? I know Kathy had a question about this that she asked me.
Could set up a Google sheet and share it with the environmental board members. And if you hear something or see something, then I guess it'd be helpful to reach out to somebody so we know that you've updated the sheet.
Right.
It can be a living document. That would be efficient.
Yeah, certainly sending an email to you or to Paul saying, hey, this, or both of the sheet's been updated, but that way they're at least there's this thing and we're not wondering, oh, did I remember to email this? Or you guys thinking, did I get an email on this? So it might just be a little bit more convenient way of doing that.
Yeah, and it beats, loose leaf paper scattered around my desk too.
There you go. And it would also help us, I think, see if we're missing anywhere, if we're seeing,
Sure.
People are recommending in a certain areas, and we know, for instance, that out on the West End, we want to get more stuff out there.
Right. We want to balance in terms of prioritizing planting sites. We certainly want to be receptive to community requests for trees, while at the same time being mindful of areas that are underserved by greenery. And not everybody wants trees in their front yard when you knock on doors, but at least it gives us something to work with, definitely.
Sounds good. Anybody have anything they want to add to that report?
I would just add that we've got probably another 12, maybe a few more than that, trees to be ordered soon that will be delivered in the fall. So Fred and Dave Hutchison, I think, kind of came up with a preliminary list for where those could be planted. I'm sure that's something that Dave will review, and we'll come up with a final list by fall.
And next year we have 20 elm trees showing up, so we need to be mindful of homes for those as well. And I think it had been mentioned in meetings past that, considering that some of those beautiful sycamores in our parks are becoming increasingly mature trees, and elm trees are also fairly slow growers, we can think of the next generations and planting some of those really big trees in key locations.
Absolutely.
Something to think about.
Gina, I think I saw your hand go up.
Sure. Two things quickly. One, we had a terrible loss of a community member, a young woman, and the idea of maybe having trees that are planted in memoriam was something I wanted to suggest or see what people might think of. Again, might be a way to connect it to the community caring more about the trees as well and experiencing outdoors. The other thing I wanted to briefly ask about, hemlocks, again, are under invasive attack, and there's been in Saratoga now introducing pest management with silver flies on that. I don't know if we have hemlocks in the city proper or if they're more of the town. So that's
We have them up on the hill behind Wilbur Park, but
no infestation as far as you know.
haven't heard of it.
Yeah, I haven't seen any. Mike, go ahead.
Gina, I think your idea is really interesting as far as memorial trees. I can foresee some potential problems with it that we'd have to think through methodically, as far as who gets memorialized and who doesn't, and whether the actual planting location is connected to the memorial. Like, do you actually plant a tree in the person's yard or something, or are you thinking you just plant it wherever you plant it, but have it known or marked in some way as a memorial tree?
That's how I saw it. I saw it as, when you said this, my thought was they could, in memorial, purchase a tree in memory of somebody, and we could present as some of our lists of, we'd have a list of approved trees, a list of, and here are some places where you could put it, and you can choose that, and maybe you'd be responsible for some of the care, or somehow. I mean, that could be put into the cost of the memorial. I don't think it'd be something. I don't see it as something that the city would be doing the memorializing. I see it more as when you, Greg, I see it more like the bricks.
We actually have, the city has a memorial tree program that has, I guess I would say, dormant, in that there hasn't been very many requests in recent years. Probably since I've been here, I can remember one or two. It's certainly something we can look at and then make it more publicly known, and maybe revisit the regulations and rules that go along with it. I think they were any ones that were planted in the park. It might have only been in Newell Park, but I'll do some digging and send you guys whatever I find on that, and then maybe you can use that to start.
Cool. Gina?
Sorry, just it seems obvious to me, but I just thought of it. We lost a lot of people to COVID and or illness and death. Maybe we should have a memorial tree for that.
Yeah, I mean, that could be something. I don't know, Mark, has there been any, I know you guys are still just kind of coming off of a really rough year in the city, trying to keep track of anything, but has there been talk about in the city level about doing a memorial for COVID?
No, there hasn't been any formal conversations about that.
Okay. That seems like a good place to start.
Again, I think it's a great idea, but I'd encourage us to, I like the format where somebody applies and comes to the city and, you know, either funds the full cost or makes some donation. So it's like the city is supporting outside people who choose to have a memorial tree, as opposed to, I mean, maybe there are rare occasions when some dignitary dies, but in general that it not be the cities that's memorializing. I like the way you said that, Kevin, that it's the city is helping people to set up a memorial.
Yeah, I think
we should also think about signage, because a memorial tree without a sign doesn't really do very much. So some way of marking that location.
Well, so, you know, on Hartwick's campus, maybe it's at SUNY's campuses too. I'm amazed at how many trees are memorialized on our campus. There's, I think, at least 15 that I've just randomly come across. Some of them are big events, some of them are donors, some of them are in memory of, and they all have a little tiny plaque. Some of the times it's a stone with a plaque on it, sometimes it's a little metal. But yeah, I think that as long as the city is just sort of facilitating that, but I want to see what, if Greg can dig up what this memorial service is. I think that'd be a fantastic place to start. And maybe we don't have to dig up all the hard questions again, because they've already been satisfactorily answered already.
Yeah, I know generally it's you know, it's donor based. You know, a donor makes an application, they pay the cost of the tree, the city would plant it for them,
Right.
and kind of approve the location. Maybe that's something that the environmental board can be involved in. As far as coming up with a planning plan, we come with some preset locations. This is where we'd like to put trees in the parks, and then people can potentially apply to put a memorial tree at that location of an approved species at their cost based on the application. But yeah, I'll send everything I can find out to you guys.
All right. Appreciate that, Greg. That's a great idea, Gina. Thank you. And Mike, yes, as always, there's always got to think these things through, because bad things can happen sometimes, especially with memorials. All right. So is there anything else on forestry?
I'm good.
Okay. Well, so that brings up community engagement. I'm still working on the Facebook page. It's Pollinator Week is coming up, so I think maybe next week I already put out one thing about Pollinator Week. I'll put up another one now that I know that the bee ordinance has finally been fully approved, and we can start marketing that, if you will. So if you guys know of any bee resources or anything like that that you think might be appropriate to share, send them my way, and I'll put them up there. I've had a few people, mostly kids that I know, send me some photos. I don't know if you've seen them. We had Mike's son, Jacob, had a wonderful picture of a robin feeding some baby birds that got a lot of attention on the Facebook page. And shortly after that, another high schooler, who's a friend of the family's, had sent in a picture of a bald eagle, a juvenile bald eagle, flying away with a newly caught breakfast. And that also is getting some of the things. So if you have anything like that, or you know kids that are in the area, I really like the idea of these kids sending in photos to be shared of nature. So if you know any, if you have any, if you're adjacent to any that like to take photos of wildlife or plants or anything like that, send them my way. I give full credit, or I can anonymize it, however, parents, guardians, whatever, like, but I've been getting a kick out of having the kids doing this sort of thing. So I encourage all of you to send the photos my way. But that's about that. I think maybe, I don't know what, that's another question, I guess, for you, Mark. Has the city talked about when in-person meetings are going to occur?
Yes, early July, I forget the exact date. I think we are planning on the first common council meeting, and I'd have to check my calendar to let you know what that one is. But I think that's it. I don't know if we have any committee meetings prior to that, but yes, early July.
Okay, because I'm thinking that one of the things that we talked about in this board at the beginning of the year, probably in the February meeting, I guess, was one, or maybe the January meeting, we were talking about having some community outreach, trying to set up some times for communities to come in and meet with the environmental board and discuss some of the questions or concerns that they might have. Is this something that we might want to pursue again? If it is, when do we want to start doing that? We've got a lot of things going on the ground right now, so I feel like we're not in a bad place to start doing some public outreach. It wouldn't, we've gotten things rolling, and I think they're started between the trees and some of the stuff that Mike's been working will report on and Gina will report on. So maybe it's time to reach out, and so I'd like to have some thoughts from all of you on that. I mean, it could be as simple as really just advertising and putting aside some space at the first in-person meeting that we might have as a council, as an environmental board, sorry. And just encourage people to come in, and we might set aside and say, we're going to set aside, half hour or so to hear about some ideas that the public might want for the environmental board to look at. I don't know. Oh, everybody likes to talk, and now you're going to be quiet. Gina.
Perhaps we can share a few rough ideas offline via email.
Sure. That is fine if you'd prefer to do that, because they're just too hazy to want to commit. That is fine too. So if you have anything else that you want to do, just come on out and send them to me or to the group, and we can have that discussion as well, because I know it's hot and humid, and if you're like me, my brain's melted. Mike.
2 questions following your comment. Do we have a date scheduled for when we'll return to in-person meetings?
Certainly not after, not before July, which will be our next meeting. I don't know. I have not heard what is going to happen. That's why I asked Mark.
Yeah, at this point, the only discussions I've heard are more with reference to the council returning to normal. Greg, I don't know if you have other information on that.
Yeah, so we're going to implement a system of basically installing a wide angle camera that's high definition and linking that to the audio system in the council chambers so that we can continue to do Zoom broadcasts even when you are able to meet in person again. That way anyone who's not comfortable coming in or can't make it can still participate. We're hoping to have that installed and functional by the first council meeting in July. And I think after that, we would, everything's going smoothly, we'll start reincorporating in-person meetings for other boards and commissions. There's really no reason we can't at that point. But we haven't really announced a finalized plan for implementing in-person public meetings, but we expect to do that pretty soon. So I guess stay tuned.
All right, so we're looking at probably later summer at the earliest, and we'll look for more guidance as to how that's going to be dealt with for us as well. So yeah, Paul, and then Mike.
So you did know. So before I was asked to serve on this environmental board, I had no idea that it even existed, and so and I don't know what other boards exist under the city charter as well. Maybe there are other kinds of boards. I don't even know. So I guess my point is that Kevin, you mentioned like some kind of a public outreach or invite the public for comment. It might be a good idea to do something like that, or some way to simply make the community know that there are boards, like the environmental board, to whom they can, reach out with questions or concerns or commentary. So some way of even letting the community know that these boards even exist, and these are some of the things that they try to take some responsibility for. Again, I didn't know that this board existed, and maybe I'm not alone. So if I saw something that was like this really wacky happening in the community, if I saw some infestation of hemlock trees or something like that, I wouldn't even know that there was a place to turn to.
I think that is probably a fair assessment of things, and that's one of the reasons why I'm trying to get. I do want to get more out there. I don't know how well known this is. I can look at my Facebook engagements. We got quite a few likes, so people are following us on the webpage, so that's good. But yeah, we can do more. And anybody has any ideas about ways of doing that, we can certainly do that. Maybe the city can have an interview on local radio stations and talk about this, or maybe that's something the city administrator can do. I wouldn't want to overstep any bounds and become a radio star. I heard
Hey,
video
Kevin?
killed it anyways. Yes, Gina.
Oh, just a quick note, in many communities, the local meetings are listed in the upcoming events in the paper.
They are. They are.
So we
those
have
are.
a new management over there, and we might find a receptive ear. And if we have something more specific, like a town hall on X, Y, or Z, I agree that we should use Town Square Media. And
I do know that all of these things are at least in the past when they were in person were publicized. They went to they went to the Daily Star. We can certainly try. Somebody in the city must do. Maybe that's Carrie. Would be the person who talks with them, so I can talk to her and see what kind of communication happens still with that.
I meant the free paper.
Oh, the free paper, yes. I don't know, Greg, do you know if we send announcements to them too, or Bonnie?
I know that it goes to the Daily Star for sure. I'd have to check with Carrie about the Freeman Journal, the free one.
Okay, thank you.
I believe we, when we send out Nixle PSAs and updates, I'm not sure that we send one out for every meeting that's announced, but when we send those out, there's a list of local media contacts that are included. So we can probably look into that and see and make sure that all the meeting announcements go to them. I think it's kind of up to them what they publish or talk about, but.
Right, but as long as if we can get it out to them, then they can make that choice. But if we're not getting it out to them, they can't even make that choice. So, okay, yeah, I can follow up on that.
It is a media distribution, so it goes to various. I can confirm that.
Okay.
All of our city meetings.
Okay. Yeah, I figured there was some law about that. But yeah, we should figure out ways of getting the word out to know what we're doing in a little bit better way. So, but there's probably city protocols for that. So I'll talk to Carrie and see what ways we might be able to do to get better promotion of because there are other ones. There's there's a social justice board, Paul. There's the Parks and Rec board. There's a number of boards that have mixed. They're kind of like this one. So, all right. So we'll do that. And so that brings. Yep. Mike.
I think either to convince someone they want to give up their evening and spend it with us, they either have to be really excited about something environmental or mad about it. So, I mean, making people mad might be a good way to get people out, but it's probably not really what we want to do. But I think a listening session is a great idea, or a town hall, call it what you want, but I think probably would have more attendance if we slightly narrowed the focus, not just say this is on any environmental issue, but say this is on some subset of issues. And, 3 months later or something, we could, have time for a different issue.
Oh, yeah, that'd be fine too.
I also don't think it's good for our first in-person meeting because we'll be getting used to having our in-person meeting. So I think if you think about it, if we set a goal of doing it sometime September, October, November.
That was my plan. My idea was I was trying to ask not so much if we're going to do the next meeting, because you're right. Whenever that next meeting is, there's going to be a lot of bugs to shake out and just get used to that. So the idea that I had, the reason I was asking was just to figure out when that might be. And so it's looking like probably, you're right, September, October would be a good first meeting. I do like the idea. I remember we talked about this now, about trying to have a slightly more focused thing. We're going to have this discussion. Please come out and talk. Mark.
Thanks. If I could, I think you all have your focus, and I think that's the standing committees that you have. You've identified them as the areas that you feel are really important that you want to put your time into. I would suggest maybe engaging the community around those particular meetings. Maybe you have one meeting dedicated to each one of those particular areas, and it might suggest, the public might suggest some different ways to be able to go, or different issues you're not aware of, and you might find some folks with common cause that might want to get involved in some of these standing committees. So my apologies for telling you all what to do, but just a suggestion.
No, that's why you're here. No, I think that's right. I think because one of the other things that I wanted, my hope for we've also talked about with these things, is that we get a lot of people who don't want to necessarily commit to this thing, but want access to helping out, pulling out Japanese knotweed, or, they got some other thing that they want to, we've had some small little groups trying to do cleanup work and things like that. And it might be, this could also be a way of centralizing those efforts of other people, where we can be kind of a way station. But I think you're right. We should for right now focus on probably what we've already identified, and see what comes out of that. And I do like the idea of centering, and why also change things up too much from what we were already working on, and seeing if we can just get more people involved. And out of those conversations, they probably will come up with new ideas as well. So, okay, excellent. So let's think about that. Let's think about how we might want to start that, what that might look like, thinking right now that this might realistically happen sometime in September, October, something like that. So just enough time to think about it, also enough time to forget about it until the month before that we want to do it, and then panic. So at least if that's how I operate, I tend to operate these things. So. All right, excellent. So yeah, I have nothing to say about energy. Gina, do you have anything? We haven't really been spending, our time has not really been spent a whole lot on that subset of things.
We last talked about, we need to have some sense of where the county is going and how we might leverage with that.
That's right. I have a meeting with with some members of the county on climate change next Friday. So, or this, no, oh no, it's this Friday, I think. Anyway, this Friday or next. And so that would be a time, that's right. So I can talk to them and get a better idea of what's happening. It's with that. I don't know, Greg, are you going to that meeting? That vague meeting that might be, it's next Friday. It's the 18th.
I have to.
The client, I know. I mean, you don't have your whole schedule memorized. The Tioga County Climate Smart Task Force. That's what it was.
Yeah, that's something I'm on, so I should have that remembered. But yeah, I'll be involved. And where we're at with that, I mean, our consultant Climate Action Associates, Jim Yinger, has been working with the various subcommittees to kind of develop a first draft of the final report. So that's just, it's been in progress for a while now. It's kind of dragged on a little bit, but I think we're getting to a point, hopefully soon, where we'll be seeing some of the deliverables.
And so, yeah, so that might be a time I'll get a better idea of what's going on there, and I can, chit chat with people around the meeting about that. Yeah, Gina, and then Mark.
Just a quick one, that the project for geothermal has begun on the SUNY campus.
Oh, huzzah. Excellent. Mark.
Yeah, Greg, just to ask, and that's so Gina and I were on one of the subcommittees. After that draft is put out, will these subcommittees be reconvening or not? I haven't heard anything back from the steering committee about what the next steps for our subcommittees might be.
Yeah, I think getting comments back to Climate Action Associates was the next step. Let me follow up after this while I'm thinking of it and see where that's at. I thought an email went out to the committee chairs, the subcommittee chairs, but maybe I'm wrong.
This is the energy task force. This is the climate task force, though.
Yeah, I was talking about the energy task force. Am I talking about the wrong thing?
Yeah, I'm good. The one that I was talking about was the climate smart task force.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Well, my apologies as well. And
oh, that's
Greg,
okay. I was in a panic. I'm like, I must have missed a lot more meetings than the one that I thought that I missed if we're already doing a final report on stuff. No, that was a
Greg,
task force that I kept being told that I should be a part of, and then somehow kept not being. So that's okay with me.
Greg, they might have my old email address. I haven't received anything.
Okay. I'll look at that.
All right. Okay, so we'll go forward on that. As about okay. So transportation, Gina.
Sure.
Do you want me to share any of those documents on the screen that you sent us, or?
Possibly. I'm sensitive that we've already used up a lot of time, so I don't want to take up too much time from people. But transportation as related to sustainable procurement. And so I would also like to share these documents with Greg, since I didn't know he was going to join us. And it's certainly going to be contingent upon city operations to want to do this. But I did send a document that also made two suggestions. The first, that we should consider promoting sustainable purchasing as relates to vehicle replacement, for example. So continuing on that transportation to reduce emissions, improve air quality. And I shared background information from the New York State executive order on sustainable purchasing and some other things. So maybe we can talk about it next time after people had a chance to look at it. And I included slides from a program that was from the Association for Sustainable Purchasing and also from the US government. So things that they do, including what we've all heard of, Energy Star based purchasing, but also bio preferred products that are less toxic to the environment, which has been embraced quite a bit by, for example, many agencies in the federal government. So how can we move in that direction that the federal government, the state has already done at the city level? We can certainly think about it with transportation, and we want to get beyond just recycled paper and other things, but what kind of products that are less toxic, et cetera. So beyond transportation, although that's my near focus, is particularly vehicles, but we want to think about other equipment that also can have some serious emissions and air quality.
So I just shared that email that you sent out earlier, Gina, with Greg.
Okay.
I just emailed it to you, Greg. So Gina, no need to send another one. I just did that so you can have that. I saw that there was some that is fantastic. If you guys have not had a chance to look at it yet.
I don't know if you want to share the screen of any of them.
Yeah, here, I can do that. Hold on.
I can't take credit for any of that directly.
Well, but you put the work in to show it to us and find it. And so credit is yours. because it helps. So here's the report that she had, that she sent us. We got 2 suggestions. The first one, she just says that we recommend a greening our fleet policy to reduce fossil fuel consumption, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and improve air quality. Through the Green Fleet program, she sent us, the New York State has a Green Fleet program. And there's a number of ways of doing that. Some of them more or less useful for the city, but not just cleaner vehicles, but right-sized vehicles, and thinking more effectively about how we use those miles. And so, carpool encouragement, now that we can get in cars again together, using webinar and conference software for meetings when possible, things like that. And then looking at fuel efficient and zero emission vehicles. It looks like the New York State is working on aggregate purchasing, which might be something useful. I know, Greg, I think that's how we got our new LED lamps, right? Was through NYSERDA aggregate purchases. Is that where we got our new LED street lamps?
Actually, NYPA.
Okay.
NYPA finance project, and they have bids out for those fixtures to get a little bit, presumably.
Yeah, so the city has worked on these aggregate programs before, and I
Right.
have to say, I love the LED lights.
And it would be terrific if we could think about, we got to buy pickup trucks. Why not buy electric ones? Why not do it through aggregate purchasing, save money for the city, and meet our goals?
Yeah, absolutely. We're definitely looking at that, and I'll take a look at this report. Thanks for putting that together, and we'll take any suggestions we can get. We certainly, I know Dave Hotang at OPT has been looking at electric buses as maybe our next round of buses. Some of them being electric, it's going that direction. So that might be maybe surprisingly one of the first electric vehicles we purchased. I'm not sure when those next round is due to be purchased, but yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So, and then I think, Gina, the other one is just a PDF. Do you want me to share that one, or is this the main document you want me to?
Well, the part 2 is that also more broadly thinking about sustainable purchasing.
Right.
But that's not the main focus now.
Oh, right. The other presentation you gave us that you sent was a PDF from Arizona State, that sustainable purchasing basics, right? Yes.
Right. So
Okay.
that's the broader one.
Right. And that's a little bit longer too. That's not an easy one to just share at the moment. So again, I encourage everyone to take a look at these. Thank you, Gina. These are, it's really nice. I know you just say you didn't do all the work, but it is so helpful to have when somebody, kind of condenses these things and finds and highlights suggestion action items. That's even better. We don't have to work through that. So yeah, I don't want to take a whole lot more time on that. Not that it's not important, but since we just did get it, I think that, taking a look at it, and we'll make sure to spend more time on it at the next meeting, and so on. Let me stop that share. So anybody have any comments on what Gina? I think Dave's just checking his camera, not raising his
No,
hand.
I was unmuting. Yeah, no, thanks for all. It's very interesting stuff. I looked over it this afternoon, and it's pretty great.
Yeah, you guys are doing great.
I really liked it as well. I guess maybe this is a question for you, Greg. I don't really know how. I mean, the city has its procurement processes, and you're probably not really keen to have a bunch of citizens start to meddle with a system that you already have in place. So I guess my question for you, and also for Mark, is how can we be helpful in encouraging the city in this direction without just getting in the way?
Thanks, Mike. I think kind of what Gina has started there, if you do a little research as you've done, and put together some resources with maybe some suggestions for the city to consider. Maybe you point to another municipality that's done it and it's gone well, and maybe something we should look at and consider. Then we can take that once a year. We update our purchasing policy, usually in fall. that would be the time that we would take to look at some things. I mean, I wouldn't expect major changes to happen all at once, but if there's certain things you want us to key on and you can point us in the right direction, I think that'd be helpful. And then when the time comes when we normally go through that review, we can look and see what we can fit in and what issues might come up and go from there.
The thing to remember, Mike, is we are an advisory committee, advisory board. And so, our job is to send our advice. That's what we did with keeping, you're kind of in the middle of it all, Mike, but the way the B ordinance started, again, as history, was that a citizen, somebody from the city, resident of the city, presented this idea. We started looking at that, and we made recommendations to the city that this get considered, and then we, again, having something specific is helpful. I think that having Stephen have the trial ordinance already kind of a draft for us to look at, and giving that to the appropriate legislative committee helped that go forward. And then, we can further advise. But that's why I think the importance of having Greg or somebody at the city at as many of these meetings as we can, because this is how this information goes through without it being, here's another thing the city's doing wrong or something like that. It becomes much more ingrained or intertwined or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Kevin. And me being aware of what your priorities are, if you have certain suggestions, I'm happy to look at those and see how we might implement them. But ultimately, I guess the way it really works is an advisory committee or board to the council. With Mark here, if you want to make recommendations to the council sets the priorities for me and the staff to then implement. Especially if it's going to be something that has cost implications or is going to take a lot of staff time. That's something that we need to have the council support on. So I think that's the technically the proper channel of recommending things. But my involvement here, if there are things that come up that I know we can address just through the normal course of business, then I'll take that into account. Sure.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Gina. All right. Anybody else have anything they want to add to that? No? All right. And so, Dave and Paul, I think you're up for some stuff. What are we calling it? Public spaces?
You mean Mike and Paul?
Who did I say? Dave and Paul?
Yeah, I think it's Mike.
Yeah, Mike and Paul.
Yeah.
You didn't have to vote me in as chair. I'm just saying.
Okay. Yeah, good. Hey, wonderful. Mike, you want to go? You can tell them what we talked about yesterday and things?
Or do you want to, or do you want me to?
No, you.
All right. Let me see what I wrote down. Paul and I had an in-person meeting. It was very exciting. And thought about what the process might look like for implementing this idea of naming project for local geographic features, and also declaring an official city, icons of different types, tree, plant, bird, and so on. And it seems like the first step, Mark, is that we need to get buy-in from council, because it's the council that has the authority as far as US is concerned for renaming or naming geographic features. Basically it's the local unit of government that has that authority, and USGS makes the final determination, but they generally heed the requests of local units of government. I'm less clear on the exact process of, sort of naming the official city bird or tree or thing. I think that's just pretty much up to council as well. So anyway, after you or someone talks to council and gets their buy-in, I think what we talked about would be a program focused on the elementary schools to get kids involved in naming their local features. there are 3 creeks that are mostly or entirely within the city that are unnamed. There are a bunch more that are sort of on the margins or are mostly in the town of Oneonta. And I haven't gone through the hills yet, but similarly. So, you know, not that we would exclude adults, but we thought that it might be a great opportunity for environmental education to work with schools. So once we were thinking once we know we have council buy-in that we would approach the school principals and basically have a program for the students, work with the teachers, and have a relatively short, Paul suggested we have a relatively short sort of nomination period so it doesn't drag out, where the schools, however the schools wanted to do it, would brainstorm, come up with and nominate names. And then that there be a public component as well, so that, you know, your average person who wanted to be involved would also have a chance to recommend names. And we also talked about what the priorities might be for how to choose these things. And I felt, and I think, Paul, I think you agreed with me, that we don't really want to name things after people who are unrelated to that location. You know, like Lettuce Highway is fine for a human-made object like a highway, but that natural features, we'd rather see names that reflected either the natural history or sort of were descriptive names of the features. Did I miss anything, Paul? Is that? I think that's everything we discussed.
Paul, you're muted.
Paul, you're muted if you're talking.
Sorry, yeah, thank you. So we thought about engaging a couple of the local elementary school principals, especially the schools that have close proximity to a couple of these creeks that Michael identified. And then maybe the teachers might be able to the principals might suggest some teachers that might, you know, want to sit around a table and think about how they would, you know, what they could do with their kids to sort of come up with maybe a list of a couple of names that might work for a creek. And then we're thinking, well, if we did this groundwork and if the school kids came up with a couple of names that were appropriate based on the local geology or the fauna and flora, I guess where our concern then would be like, you know, would the recommendation be acceptable by, or even would the Common Council be receptive of the potential name? You know, so I think the idea was that the higher ups would have a sense of what's going on, and they knew that this was coming. So instead of just landing on their laps and saying, "Hey, here's this process was underway, and here's a name for this tree, and go ahead and approve it," but that they knew what the process was and that was in the works, and so that when the list of possible new names came to them, they said, "Oh, great, here it is," instead of "What is this?"
And along a discussion, I sent you guys some emails that I had. Gina had at the last meeting suggested we look into whether there were any historic Native American names beyond the ones that are, you know, that are already in use, such as Otsego and Susquehanna and whatnot. And so I talked to a couple anthropologists, and as far as I can learn, there are no known Mohawk names for other places, you know, in the area, other than ones that are still being used.
Or in the case of some of them, made up.
Right. Well, they also these two people I talked to also talked about that. They gave Oyarin Hill as an example of something that was apparently just made up by Willard Jaeger because it sounded like a Mohawk word, although it wasn't actually at all used by the Mohawk. So anyway, they said, I don't know if we want to go the route of renaming things that already have names. that becomes more political than just naming things that don't have names at all. But that was one thing that they suggested as well that we could think about.
Gina?
Just real quick, one recommendation is also what not to do, and trying to do what Jaeger did, which is come up with fake names that sort of sound native is really a no-no. So we were, trying to think about what best practices were more broadly, but there didn't seem to be a whole lot of guidance on that, other than, don't try to create native sounding or cheesy, floaty McFloat boat kind of names.
Yeah, I think the idea is to get the public input in the names and then have some other process than public voting on the names.
Right.
So
have
that
it be
we can-
advisory. Have it be advisory to council or something like that, so that.
Right. And I think, yeah, I think putting in not rules so much, but I think Gina, you're right. It's let's just avoid the whole thing. Let's try to keep these things descriptive. Is there a local name? Have you discovered a local name, like, that's not necessarily made up, like, oh, that's, White Creek or something, or Dried Up Creek or, whatever, I don't know. So I mean, it could be a history lesson, a local history lesson. I think it's good identifying if we can, getting Common Council on board as early as possible. Figuring out how we're going to do this in terms of making the final decision, getting the principals involved to help identify a teacher or two in each school. I know that and Mark probably knows better than any of us because he's in education, how these probably align with quite a few things. So in terms of the state education objectives. So Mark, did you have anything?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest, I see these as two very separate ideas. A city flower or city tree, I think, is different than the naming of unnamed or potentially unnamed features. So I think that one might be a rather easy one. The challenging bit, I think, would be is making sure that I think we need to really think about these features and that they would need to lie within the city. We need to be careful. So many of our hills aren't in the city's property, right? They're actually the towns. So I think we need to be careful about overstepping our boundaries literally in terms of the naming, but things that are completely within the city, I think we can certainly do. That said, I think the best way to do it, and as you were talking, I was kind of taking notes and crafting out an email, is to have one or two, Paul or Mike, representatives of that idea to speak with the planning committee. I think that would be the place it should probably go first. And then to present both the ideas, again, separated ideas, as well as some of the thinking behind it, as well as the process that you've talked about, being able to involve the city in naming these particular either sites or coming up with the adopted natural flower, whatever it might be. I think I think you just need to start the conversation and see and take it from there. I'm suggesting that you both bring it forward. I've mentioned it, but I think bringing it forward that you all have been doing the research and can speak to it a little bit more first persons, but I'm certainly happy to bring it forward. But I do think it's always best to hear from the folks that are kind of bringing the ideas to council.
I think that makes sense. Greg, just to give you a little background on here, the idea is that if you know something's name, you're more attuned to these sorts of, to the environment that's around you. And so this is some ideas possibly down the road. Also, it'd be like, putting in together a city bird that we can work with the Audubon Society with, a city fossil, work with some geologists about that. But even just putting out more nameplates on trees and parks and stuff like that, so not just, place names, if you will, but also just, species names, local names, everybody has, there's the official scientific name, right? But then there's the really official name of what people really call these animals or these these plants and so on. And so trying to down the road, putting up some signage and putting people back in touch with the stuff that they're seeing in the city, you start to care about it more. So that's kind of what the genesis of all this was, so that Greg knows. But I think this is a good idea. I think if you guys, I think Paul, Mike, I think if you wanted to go ahead and put together a kind of a proposal to send along to the Planning Commission. Is that what we said it was? I don't remember. I already forgot.
It's a planning committee. It's a committee, standing committee of the Common Council.
Right. So if you wanted to send something to us first, then go ahead and do that. I think that makes, does everybody think this is a good idea? Once we get something a little bit more put down on paper. I think it's great. I think you guys, this is some good ideas. If you want to run it by us via email or the next meeting, that would be great. And then we can look at you. Yes, Gina.
I appreciate the last communications we got was good and detailed. I think that there should be some kind of proposal-based format that we can endorse, maybe simultaneously or before you go to the Planning Commission.
Yeah. So, okay. So if you guys could think of something and, send it out to us earlier if you want some more ideas or some help. We're not trying to put this all on you guys, but if we had something to look at maybe by the next meeting that we could then endorse and have you be like we did with the bees again, right? We had this, we put up a little endorsement letter. And then I went to the legislative committee. It'd be an endorsement letter from us, but you guys would go and speak to it. I think
that makes sense. A couple questions for all of you. Initially, this was sort of two separate ideas that got merged together, the sort of naming geographic features and then the official city icons. Mark, I heard you saying that maybe it shouldn't be combined. I guess that's a question for all of you. The process could be parallel, but is it going to be problematic if we do both things at once? Is it better to focus on one or the other?
Well, I certainly think keep them delineated. Right, because the official process is different from both, and the implications are different for both as well, right? I mean, there's not going to be a whole lot of hue and cry if somebody's favorite bird doesn't get picked up, but if we're not careful with the naming of a place, so I think I don't have a problem floating both ideas to the planning commission, and get a sense from them which ones they might think might be the best way to go forward. But I think making sure that they are considered two separate proposals in a sense that just happen to share some commonalities, so it kind of makes sense to talk about them at the same time, would be fine. But I certainly think that you would want to have, here's one document with this proposal, here's another document with this proposal, and try to keep them as separate as possible, and then let other people decide how best to go, unless anybody else has some other opinions on that. Kathy, anybody? Guys got thumbs up. All right. Gina.
Seems to me the planning is only concerned with the creeks. The bird, flower, etc. would be possibly Parks and Rec.
Sorry, just to clarify, it's confusingly named, but I think Mark was talking about the Planning Committee, which is a subcommittee of the council, as opposed to the Plan Commission,
right, which
does architecture and development.
Yep. But the Planning Committee is about places.
True. Okay, well, let's get the proposals out and we'll think about where to send them separately. But I think that if we ourselves start to think of them more separately going forward, I think it's been fine sort of conflating the two back and forth as we're talking about similar ideas. And so I think we can leave it, Mike, to you and Paul, which if you want to pursue putting together two sort of draft ideas, or you want to focus on one or the other, I think we'll let you two decide that. And then we can go from there. Is that?
That makes sense. One last question for clarification from all of you guys. We've talked about city icons, but we never really defined what exactly. I think I heard people at different points say tree, plant, bird, animal.
Flower,
Do you guys have thoughts?
flower.
All of the above? Just some of the above?
I think all of them for now. Why not? I mean, you can go dig down deep in all these things. Beer brand. Sorry, that'd be the colleges. I'm sorry, I apologize.
Invasive.
Most irritating mammal.
Yeah.
Well, depending on the day, I
Groundhog.
guess. No.
Wait, undergraduate.
No.
What are you talking about?
No, I love the groundhogs. I saw a baby one the other day. Mark.
So it sounds like then you all will finalize this all at the next meeting. And as Gina suggests, have something that you all will kind of approve and move forward. So I'm just trying to work on timing and kind of emailing back and forth with the chair of that committee. Usually would meet, I forget what exact date in July, but late July, would you be ready for that time after your July meeting? Or would you rather push that to late August? In terms of talking with the planning committee? Because at least one of them will be going forward there.
I have confidence in the two of them that they'll have something to show us in the July meeting. I mean, it's just talking, right? I think, you know, you guys put
drafted ideas by the July meeting. I mean, we already have a lot of ideas in our heads, and we've already expressed a lot of it. I think we can write it down in clear language by the July meeting.
I think so. I mean, the stuff that you've been forwarding us has been very clear, very helpful. And I think let's move on this. I think you guys have put a lot of work in there, and I think the board is ready to start working with you to certify and clean up the stuff and move it forward. And maybe we can get something done in less time than it took for bees.
I think we can do it in July. Just Paul, just so you know, I will probably be unavailable. Depending on the date, I'm likely to be unavailable because I'll be off in the woods. So
Naming things.
If you're comfortable being the one presenting, that's fine. Let's move ahead.
We'll take it as it goes. I'm also away a lot in July, but we'll figure it out as it goes. And if it's July, or we'll work on it in the next couple of days, next couple of weeks, and see how far we get, and kind of just go from there.
Sounds
I
good.
think it needs to have a deadline right now necessarily. Let's just move it along.
No, it's just more of a let's have a target. If something happens, it happens. I mean, but I think we're at a place where I think we want to start seriously considering moving this off of our discussion plate and make it somebody else, help get somebody else on board with this. All right, guys. Is that it?
That's it for us.
Oh, yes, actually one thing. So Mike, you and Kathy are going to talk with Hutch about the water district overlay, hopefully. Yeah. Kathy, is that what you're going to talk about?
Yeah, we were emailing back and forth, Mike and Dave and I, trying to find a time to get together. I don't know about you, Mike. I don't know a lot about watershed and what issues are involved, but I'm willing to learn and do the legwork to find out, because Dave seemed to think it was something that we should really look into.
Well, the good news about watersheds is they're as simple and as complicated as you want them to be.
Well, I guess I'll learn, but I'm willing to do the legwork there.
So yes, by our next meeting, Kathy and I will get trained by David, and we'll report back to you guys.
Okay, excellent. So yes, so we got that. That's starting to move forward too. So thank you, Kathy, for bringing that to my attention earlier this week. So, all right. Having nothing else to do, we are through our agenda. And so I am going to thank you all for your service and your time this evening. Get outside in the cool air, hopefully hasn't gotten rehumidified. And I'm going to call this meeting adjourned at 8:28. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.